A recent event left me reeling with shock and disbelief. My mother-in-law, in an unexpected and cruel act, took my passport and deliberately set it on fire. It ignited quickly, crumbling to ashes in mere seconds. The fire consumed it so fast. My dream vacation to St. B's Island was abruptly shattered. I could only stand there, stunned, as she coolly told me that, since I was a stranger to her, I wouldn't be traveling anywhere. I would be staying home with her. My husband, standing nearby, simply grinned in silent complicity. Their treachery stung, though I should have known better. Still, the coldness with which they executed their plan caught me off guard. They seemed to take some twisted pleasure in their actions, sharing a laugh over their perceived victory. Frustrated and desperate to reclaim my dignity, I reminded them of who I was. My name is Kayla. I'm 30 years old, and I'm a linguist. I teach and research languages at the university. My work takes me abroad often, as I engage with different cultures and share my knowledge through an organization I run. My job demands frequent travel, sometimes keeping me away for months. Before all this, I never imagined myself married. But then, when I was 25, I returned home and met Peter, who would eventually become my husband. Despite my career's challenges, Peter and I made it work. Our relationship has always been maintained through constant calls and emails. We married when I was 27, and though our marriage means long separations, he's always supported me. Now, after 6 long months, I was returning home. Despite the exhausting flight and the traumatic events with my passport, a rush of excitement surged through me. I couldn't wait to be in Peter's arms again, to finally put this whole ordeal behind me and restore the peace between us. When I arrived, however, Peter wasn't home yet. I began tidying up, something I always did despite his reminders to keep things neat. Normally, I'd be irritated at the clutter, but today, I let it slide. I was just too happy to be home. Then, I heard the door. It was Peter. My heart leaped as I rushed to greet him. "Welcome home, Peter. It's so good to see you." But his response was flat, almost indifferent. "Oh, hi, Kayla. You're back?" I froze, stunned by his lack of enthusiasm. After 6 months apart, was that all he had to say? My voice trembled with frustration. "We haven't seen each other in 6 months. Peter, aren't you going to say you missed me?" He shrugged, as if the reunion wasn't something worth celebrating. "We've been doing this for a while. I guess I'm just used to it. I'm really tired." The pain was unmistakable. "Is dinner ready?" he asked, almost dismissively. "Yes, it's ready. Let's eat." I tried to focus on the meal, hoping for some warmth in our time together, but Peter's attention was split, his eyes glued to his phone. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Peter, why do you keep staring at your phone?" I asked, my voice edged with irritation. "There's nothing wrong," he muttered without looking up. "But we've been apart for months," I continued. "We've kept in touch through calls and emails. There's nothing new to discuss. Doesn't this moment, being together again, mean anything to you?" My voice grew sharper with each word, and I could see it annoyed him. He slammed his phone down on the table, his eyes flashing with irritation. "You just got off a plane," he snapped, "but I'm exhausted from work." I bit back a retort but couldn't help myself. "I also came straight here after work. Peter, don't talk to me like that. I didn't ask you to rush," he shot back coldly. "You chose to come home immediately." His words stung, and I could feel the space between us growing. "You don't have to say it like that. I missed you, despite everything." There was a long silence, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. The reunion I had envisioned, a joyful moment of reconnection, was slipping through my fingers. Peter's response was colder than I ever expected. As we sat down for dinner, he blurted out, "I didn't ask you to rush home. If you're going to act like this, maybe you shouldn't have come back at all. You're being annoying, Kayla." In a fit of frustration, he slammed his hand on the table and stormed out, leaving his dinner untouched. I sat there alone, stunned and confused. Why was he acting so distant, so unfeeling? I had been looking forward to this moment for so long, only to have it turn into something so painfully empty. What was the point of coming home early if all it did was lead to this disappointment? Tears welled in my eyes as I stared at the untouched meal, the once welcome thought of reunion now tainted by a cold, sinking feeling. The next morning, the atmosphere between Peter and me remained thick with unresolved tension. I greeted him with a tentative, "Good morning," but he shot me a frosty look and responded bitterly, "I envy you. You get to relax at home all the time while I'm stuck working." His words hit me like a slap. I knew they weren't true, and I immediately corrected him. "That's not accurate, Peter. I work too, summarizing our activities, preparing for training sessions. It's more work than you think." But he dismissed my efforts with a wave. "Sure, but you can do it from home. I wish I had a job where I could take half the year off. You enjoy your time at home, princess." The sarcasm in his voice was sharp, and I watched him leave without another word. It wasn't the first time we'd argued, but the cruel tone he used left me stunned. The distance between us was growing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was shifting in our relationship. Trying to clear my mind, I turned to housework, vacuuming the living room and changing the linens, but as I worked, my phone rang, interrupting the quiet. I glanced at the screen. It was my mother-in-law. My stomach churned with unease as I answered. Hello, Kayla Hede. Hi, Kayla. It's been a while. I heard you're back home and had a rough day yesterday. Yes, that's right, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. And I also heard you upset Peter. He was quite angry, she added. Her words only deepened my confusion. What had I done wrong, and how could I fix it? Then, her suggestion took me by surprise. Now that you're back, how about we plan a family trip, she said. Before I could process her words, she continued. I was talking to my husband about going to Bert's Island, and Peter mentioned he wanted to join us. You used to travel a lot, right? Could you help us with hotel reservations and other arrangements? I felt an unease ripple through me. Her offer wasn't just a suggestion, it was a thinly veiled request. It was clear from her tone that she didn't genuinely want to travel with me, but instead, she saw an opportunity to use my experience. My relationship with her had always been strained. She'd never hidden her disdain for me, not since we first met at our wedding reception. Her comments had often been biting, and over the years, they hadn't softened. When I was abroad, she would send me messages like, how can you be a wife and stay away from home for months? If you can't manage the house, maybe my son should have married someone else. It was a mistake letting him marry you. Her attitude left me wary of any interaction with her, and this proposal felt like another attempt to manipulate me for her own convenience. But try as I might, I couldn't find the strength to turn her down, even though I knew I was being used. A few hours later, Peter returned home from work, his mood noticeably lighter than it had been that morning. Dropping his briefcase onto the sofa, he gave me a wide, almost eager smile. Mom called, didn't she? We're going on that trip to B's. Yeah, I heard, I replied cautiously, my heart tightening in my chest. He pressed, but you're not going to turn it down, right? Mom really wants you to come with us. His enthusiasm made it even harder to voice my reservations. I knew he wanted me to be involved, but the whole situation felt uncomfortable. How could I navigate this without making things worse or feeling even more manipulated? When I hesitated, he didn't let it slide. Come on, why don't you just go with Mom and Dad as you originally planned? The words slipped out before I could stop them. Why don't you just go with them, Peter? His expression immediately hardened. He clicked his tongue, and his voice dropped into a more threatening tone. You need to understand your role here. The only time you're useful to us is when we're traveling. The sting of his words caught me off guard. You don't have to speak like that, I protested, my voice shaking. It's true, isn't it? He shot back, undeterred. Anyway, you'll handle all the flight and hotel bookings. Everything should be in my name, as you probably know. But Peter, you're going to pay for the whole trip, right? I asked, hoping to clarify the financial arrangement. He scoffed. What are you talking about? We'll split it 50-50. It's a small price to pay to show respect to our parents, he added, as though my objection was disrespectful. And what is that supposed to mean? I asked, feeling my frustration rise. If you've got all the time to lounge around at home, why don't you just make the reservations yourself? Make the reservations now, he demanded coldly. You've got the time. My hands clenched into fists, my heart pounding. This isn't right, I muttered, barely able to contain my anger. I don't want to, I murmured, my voice barely audible. What did you say? Peter scoffed, grabbing a beer from the fridge and downing it in one go. His dismissive attitude stung, but I didn't have the energy to argue. Despite the unfairness of the situation and the turmoil churning inside me, I felt cornered, humiliated, and powerless. I had no choice but to comply. Reluctantly, I began making all the arrangements for the flights and accommodations for the trip to Bert's Island, just as Peter and his mother had insisted. The day of the trip finally arrived. I was supposed to pick them up from my in-laws' house and head straight to the airport, but in the days leading up to our departure, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I found myself lying awake late one night, unable to sleep. When I realized Peter wasn't next to me, I got up and walked to the living room, where I overheard him on the phone. It's fine, Mom, I'll be there first thing in the morning. Just take care of the passport issue. I'm really looking forward to it. I'll make sure to introduce her to you, he said into the receiver. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My stomach twisted in confusion. What was supposed to be a simple family trip was now laced with secrecy and hidden agendas. I stood there in the dark, unsure of how to confront what I had just heard. Peter had mentioned a passport and someone he was going to introduce to his mother. The pieces didn't fit. I knew something was happening behind my back, but I couldn't put it together. The dread gnawed at me, and I resolved to stay alert. The next day, I went through the motions of packing, making sure everything was in order, both my things and Peter's. with everything packed. We drove to my in-laws' house. As we pulled up, I could feel the tension building. I had no idea what was waiting for me, but I was ready to face it head-on. We were greeted only by my mother-in-law. "Oh, hi, Kayla. Good to see you. We're almost ready. Just need a few more things," she said in her usual casual tone, though there was an urgency in her voice that immediately set me on edge. "Okay, take your time," I replied, my unease growing. "Oh, and Kayla, could you grab the carry-on from the other room? It's heavy, so make sure to get Peter to help you," she added, her eyes flicking briefly to Peter. I noticed the subtle exchange of glances between them and instinctively, my hand went to my pocket to check that my passport was still safely there. Something about the situation didn't feel right. I returned to the living room, carrying the heavy bag, and found my mother-in-law standing there with a malicious grin on her face. In her hand, to my horror, was my passport. "You're not going on this trip, Kayla," she said, the words dripping with satisfaction. "What do you mean, I'm going?" I said, disbelief creeping into my voice as the reality of the situation began to sink in. She shrugged, not even trying to hide the coldness in her eyes. "I was just using you to handle the arrangements. You're a stranger here, you'll stay behind." Her words hit me like a slap. Betrayal, manipulation, all of it was worse than I had imagined. I wasn't just an outsider in their plans, I was a pawn, discarded as soon as I had outlived my usefulness. The depth of their deceit shocked me, leaving me frozen in place, unsure of how to respond. Without another word, my mother-in-law stormed into the kitchen. A flicker of flame caught my eye as she lit a lighter and set my passport on fire in the sink. The paper curled and blackened, quickly reduced to ashes as I watched in stunned silence. "We did it," she exclaimed triumphantly, as if she had just won a great victory. Peter, who had been standing silently nearby, joined her with an enthusiastic cheer. "Yeah, Mom, we did it." "No," I screamed, my voice breaking. "This is just the three of you, right? You'll introduce me to Peter's new girlfriend when you get back." "Yeah, I've already set that up," my mother-in-law said dismissively. "We don't need you anymore." I stood there, feeling the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me. My father-in-law stepped forward then, his expression cold. He pulled out his phone and showed me pictures of himself with another woman, looking smug. "I'm not divorcing you for the sake of my reputation, but when we get back from this trip, I'll be living with her. You can leave when we return." His words were like a knife to the heart. My mother-in-law laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed in my ears. Their faces were full of malice, and in that moment, I realized I no longer had a place in this family. I forced a smile, trying to mask the turmoil within me. "By the way, whose passport is that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What are you talking about?" my mother-in-law replied, her tone flat. "It's yours. I took it out of your handbag." I pulled my actual passport from my pocket and held it up, my hands shaking. "My passport is right here," I said, the realization dawning on me. "What? No, it can't be," my mother-in-law stammered, her confident facade crumbling in an instant. I held up my passport, still intact and unscathed. "It's mine, see for yourself," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions brewing inside me. Her face drained of color as the truth began to sink in. "That's not possible," she muttered, her voice trembling, as if trying to convince herself more than me. It was clear now, she had assumed she had taken my passport from my handbag, but in her haste, she hadn't bothered to double-check before setting it alight. Her malicious plans had backfired spectacularly. "Whose passport did I burn, then?" she asked, her voice quaking with a mix of panic and confusion. "I think it was your son's passport," I replied, my words cold but filled with the satisfaction of seeing her unravel. "You burned my son's passport?" she gasped, horrified, her hands shaking as she stared at me in disbelief. The weight of her mistake hit her all at once. She had set in motion a series of disastrous events that would unravel everything. The already fractured family dynamic now lay in tatters, with her rash actions exposing all the hidden schemes beneath the surface. Chaos erupted in the room. My husband, his face flushed with anger, whipped around to face her. "What the hell have you done? I told you to be careful. There was only one passport in her bag. Who would have thought it was mine?" "I don't care, you didn't check properly, and now look what's happened," she shot back, her voice rising defensively. The tension between them boiled over. Their blame game escalated as the weight of the situation pressed down on all of us. In the midst of their shouting match, Peter turned to me. "Hey, Kayla, do something." But I was done being dragged into their mess. "Seriously? Who the hell do you think you are, telling me what to do? You cheated on me behind my back, and now you're playing the victim? You and your mother are both despicable," I shot back, my anger boiling over. "Watch your tone," Peter snarled, stepping closer. "I'll speak however I want. You and your terrible mother have ruined everything. Don't think I'm going to let this slide. You're going to pay for everything, your affair, all the horrible things your mother said to me. Just wait, I said, my resolve hardening with each word. The shouting was interrupted by the appearance of my father-in-law, who stormed into the room, drawn by the noise. What the hell is going on here? He demanded, his voice sharp with authority. I recounted the whole story, from the passport mix-up to the affair, laying it all bare. His face twisted in fury as he processed everything. The trip to St. Bert's Island was immediately cancelled, and the fallout was swift and severe. My mother-in-law faced a divorce, and my husband was disowned by his father, banned from returning home. I didn't waste any time. I contacted a lawyer and filed for divorce. I also demanded alimony from both my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law, paid in one lump sum, along with compensation for the cancelled trip to St. Nevis Island. They were financially unprepared and had to borrow money to meet my demands. In the end, Peter, now living with his mother, found himself in dire financial straits. The woman he had cheated with also left him, abandoning him just as quickly as he had abandoned me. As for me, I took control of my future. With the alimony money, I moved into a condo, embracing my newfound independence. Though it wasn't easy, I grew stronger through the challenges. I began to love my life again, focusing on my travels, immersing myself in new cultures, and sharing my journey with the world. Free from betrayal and mistreatment, I was finally on my own path to happiness.